Good evening. Welcome to another broadcast of Around the Lake. This is a broadcast of the Ithaca Times and the Finger Lakes community newspapers. With us today is Keri Blakinger of the Ithaca Times and Mike Nocella of the Finger Lakes community newspapers.
Yeah, now, I guess we're in a transition. Keri too, I guess we're all kind of
we're all moving around,
floating between.
We both became editors.
That's
publications. So,
boy, it's going to be like Cornell. Everybody's a vice president. But we're not going to talk about Cornell this week, actually. Although they did bring out a very readable history book about Cornell, which is in this week's Ithaca Times. But we're going to talk about truck safety in light of last June's fatal truck crash downtown. There's been a lot of talk about what to do about truck safety. We're going to talk about a pipeline that they want to build through Dryden along, I think it's called West Dryden Road. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about the cover story in this week's Times about the Finger Lake Land Trust. They celebrated 25 years in existence. And then we'll talk about the report card that Keri made for the legislature for their 2014 meeting attendance. And if we get to it, we can talk about new routes as well. So Mike, this truck safety thing took place at the town hall.
Yes, it was hosted
with a lot of mucky mucks there.
Yeah, so following the June 10th accident, Assemblywoman Barbara Lifton contacted Mayor Svante Myrick to kind of check in. Obviously, this was a tragedy, and it didn't take them too long to realize that, hey, we should kind of take a look at why this happened and if there's anything we can do to stop something from like this happening again. So they put together a truck safety committee, which includes themselves, Ithaca Tompkins Transportation Council member,
Transportation Council,
Fernando de Aragon, along with other members from the Department of Transportation in New York State. And what they did, they came up with a list of 23 ideas on truck safety, and I'm not going to go through all 23 of them.
There'll be a quiz later.
But what struck me going through the list is that the majority of them are already not being considered. And the majority of this meeting, which was attended by about a couple dozen people, the majority of which were residents from Dryden.
Sure.
And that's because number 19 on the list was to send trucks coming from Route 81 once they get to the turn where you can go on to Route 38.
Richford, yeah.
Richford. And head on to Route 13 and ultimately go through Dryden was one of their possible solutions, to which Dryden said, no, thank you.
No, they already have 500 trucks going through. So.
Right, and and I guess this was already a controversial idea amongst the board, and so Myrick kind of has already said, we won't do that. One of the more interesting ones that I guess is still being investigated to see if they have the technology to do is to actually ask GPS makers or see what the GPS is telling trucks to do.
Okay.
If their final destination isn't Ithaca, but that if the GPS is still telling them to go through Ithaca because that's the shortest way, if there's a way that the GPS cannot have them do that. So that, to me, was one of the more interesting ones in theory that could actually make an impact, but I don't know if that's going to be feasible. And some of the changes that they've already made is just kind of evaluating their current signage and making it, I guess, easier to see whether it was cutting out tree limbs or any kind of coverage or just making things bolder. But as of now, they haven't made a lot of headway. It seems they're still in the kind of researching and seeing what's possible and going forward. So there will be more meetings like this.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll see what comes up.
They didn't schedule the next one?
No, they're kind of going to go back to the drawing board. As I mentioned, a lot of these they've already deemed not suitable resolutions, so they need to come up with better ideas, it seems.
Okay. Well, another Dryden story this week is about a pipeline that NYSEG would like to build from Dryden along West Dryden Road over into Lansing. And when I did my my article last summer about the Lansing building boom, when I talked to the supervisor of the town of Lansing, she said they were desperately short of gas, that they needed the pipeline just to supply residences in the town of Dryden, in the town of Lansing. And so that's the ostensible reason for building this pipeline, but the Dryden people are really up in arms. They're against fossil fuel use, period, and so to extend the fossil fuel distribution network is just sort of anathema to them, and so they're against it on those grounds, in the abstract, as it were. But also very specifically, they're worried about the danger of having gas pipelines go along their road and being in their front lawn and having their property values suffer and having the loss of trees and even buildings.
Yeah, some of them were really concerned about the specifics of the easement, the way it was written.
Right. And it's a standard, boilerplate easement.
Right, but it seems to allow that they could remove any structure on the property.
Yeah.
The way it's worded.
Right. I mean, the thing about these things, though, that I heard about when I was reading about gas leases was that when when a landman comes to your door with a gas lease, which is a contract, you can cross out anything you want and add anything you want. And if that's signed, that's the contract. And that's the case with an easement, too.
I don't think a lot of people understand this. I'm not sure a lot of these people have had to negotiate
it's very
easements
interesting.
before,
Yeah, no, that's a pretty esoteric thing. But, legal counsel would probably help a little in this context. And some of the people who are involved are attorneys, but they're not really making this clear at all, which is making people, continue to be nervous. There's this one part, and the article, I should say, is written by a guy called George Shattuck, one of our stringers. And Town Supervisor Marianne Sumner, this is Dryden Town Supervisor, asked whether the easement could be reworded to contain information regarding the nature of the project and set specific limits on NYSEG's rights over Signese land. And Negus, who is the representative of NYSEG, said, no, you have to do this one-on-one, which is what I've just said. And so when she said that, the councilman from Dryden, Greg Sloan, interjected, oh, she means no, that you can't change it. And that's just inaccurate. You can't get a blanket change and then circulate that among everyone. It's actually everybody's individual responsibility to change their contract the way they want it. So, I mean, this is going to go on for months, so we will revisit it.
And it also sounded like part of why residents would get upset, which is usually the case with anything in NYSEG, is that they were somewhat hard to get a hold of and have kind of not been easy to communicate with, which, as Ithacans know, was one of the primary culprits of the common situation.
Right, it was the same thing.
And that's what happens when you're owned by a company
conglomerate.
Across the ocean.
So I should mention that's in the Dryden Courier this week. It's on the front page, and it is a story written by, I did say this, George Shattuck, who is one of our correspondents. We'll see if we can get George on the show sometime. It's a retiring fellow. So our cover story in the Ithaca Times this week was about the Finger Lakes Land Trust. They are celebrating their 25th anniversary. And so this is Andy Zepp, the executive director of the Finger Lakes Land Trust down at 6 Mile Creek. And that was actually one of their early projects, which is one reason why they're there, was to get conservation easements in the watershed to protect it, both from development and just to keep present uses like agriculture going. And the other thing that the land trust does is set up preserves. And so I talked to him about both of these things. And he told me about how this whole thing was set up, which is kind of a pretty funny story, really. I mean, he went into marketing from with getting his degree from the Industrial and Labor Relations Department, which he told me he went to because it was state tuition. It's one of the it's one of the statutory schools at Cornell. It's a lot less expensive than the endowed colleges. And so he got his degree in marketing and was immediately in Rochester working at Sibley's department store and volunteering at the Nature Center. And so the volunteering turned into a contract position, which turned into a regular position in Connecticut. And they told him, go get a master's degree in natural resources. So he came back to Cornell to do that. And his master's project was to create the Finger Lakes Land Trust.
That's still going on today?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's got over 2,000 members. Their budget is $925,000 a year. They have over 30 preserves set aside. They have 11 staff members, 8 of which are full-time. And they are doing more and more as they get more and more money, both from donations, grants from the state and private foundations, and buying land and selling pieces of it, and then putting it other aside. They've just got the whole thing kind of down, and so it's a pretty fascinating story overall.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, other than celebrating 25 years, was there anything surprising about the story that was new information to you? Or?
It was how conservation easements work. I was unaware that the tax credits picture was so recent, because there's been land trusts for like 100 years, but it was just in the early 1980s that you could actually, when you put an easement on your property, because you can't do anything with it, it actually makes the worth of the property go down. So you can take the difference between what it would be worth if you developed it and what it's worth now that you're not going to develop it, and declare like a healthy percentage of that against your income tax at the federal level, your state income tax in some states, and in this state, your federal income and your local property taxes, which are freaking huge in this in this area. So school, county, town, and I think village, you could 25% of those you will just get back every year because you put your property in an easement. And a lot of people hear that and go, I think I'll get an easement.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
So yeah, I mean, that combined with the sort of belief that putting aside property for the good of the planet is win-win. Yeah. So anyway, that's the cover story. The legislative attendance. You did a report card on the county legislature, Keri.
Yes,
Tell us about this.
This was fun. I just figured out, based on for the 2014 year, I think there were 25 meetings total, and I just divided how many they attended by 25 and gave them a letter grade.
Keri, why don't you do us the honor of reading off the grades?
So
we do have time. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, the people who got A pluses, which I think to get an A plus, you actually had to have attended every meeting, were Will Burbank.
How many is every meeting?
I think it was 25.
Okay.
I don't know if this ended up being in the final story, but I think it was 25 meetings. They have 2 a month, and 1 special meeting. They had 1 month.
Okay. So
I did not include committee meetings in the letter grades.
Right.
Yeah, and I didn't factor in lateness. So there is one legislator who is chronically late, and that was not held against her in this.
Ooh, hint. Okay, so
the A pluses were Will Burbank, Jim Dennis, Dooley Kiefer, Dan Klein, Mike Lane, Dave McKenna, and that's it. So then A's, which means you missed 1 meeting, maybe 2, is Carol Chalk, Mike Sigler, and Peter Stein. A minus was just Leslie McBean Claiborne, and Martha Robertson had a B plus. I mean, she had a campaign, so and then Nate Shinagawa had a B. I mean, he was involved in her campaign, right? So that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Kathy Luce Herrera had a C minus. So that was the lowest grade.
Yeah.
Is it ever just like, is it an ongoing like inside joke that she's always
Well, it's not really a joke. Apparently,
I cover them. I kind of like them. I'm not gonna go there.
I was gonna say,
she actually has, I think, a chronic health problem that I've been
Right,
told.
you told me that, and I
Yeah.
tried to call her
I've
for
heard
comment just because I wanted to give her the courtesy of commenting since it was
Yeah.
the lowest grade. But I mean, I didn't hear about. I was calling her over the holidays too because this was originally written over the holidays. So
Yeah. Yeah, the
But
true
I
end
mean,
of the year.
overall, I think it's a good attendance
Oh,
record
because you
overall.
compared it to the Senate.
Right, and it was slightly worse than the Senate, but it was the average between the legislators was missing just under 6%. Whereas I found in the National Journal they reported that as of May 2014, the then current class of U.S. senators had missed 2.5% of all the votes during their tenure. Now that's not directly comparable because during their whole tenure means that one missed vote is going to count a lot less against you because it's a much larger number. And it's also counting votes, not entire meetings.
Although I think at the county legislature, they vote every meeting.
Right, but I mean, I think when they're counting votes, they're counting each vote separately if they
Oh.
vote on multiple things.
Okay. Yeah.
So you could show up late and every individual vote would be counted in it that you missed or didn't, So, I mean, so it's not directly comparable, but
how would you grade your attendance?
No.
I have a conflicting meeting one of the times. So.
That
So
may be
But
the,
I will
excused
say,
absence.
but I will say we do cover more than any other media outlet,
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I also cover some of the committee meetings too. But I like the legislature; they are fun to cover.
Now, why? Why are they fun?
They're
I used to cover them. So
they're funny. I think some of them have. Okay,
well, Jim Dennis is funny.
He is hilarious.
Yes.
Yes. He just doesn't he doesn't care. Like if somebody says something
He's a
stupid,
retired person.
he will sit there and roll his eyes anyway. Like he doesn't care.
Yeah.
I love that. But it is to me very amusing. They had an hour-long argument one time over the use of the word probably.
Ah.
I thought this was hilarious, but I mean,
Huh. Well, if you think
You know,
that's
but-
funny, that's fine.
but also they all have such specific mannerisms. Like there's one person who's always going to whatever the resolution is, insist on adding a comma.
Yeah. Well.
And there's these very predictable things they all do. So you can guess who's going to say what, who's going to ask what basic question beforehand. But I mean, I like them. I mean, there are bodies I cover that I don't like anyone on the entire board, and I mean, I like these guys. They're all nice. They're all.
Well, that is true.
They're all friendly. Not all. Most of them are easy to get a hold of. Not all of them, but most of them are.
And they have Joe Mariani.
Yeah, and and they
keep 'em
take their
all
stuff
aligned.
seriously. Like Tioga County Legislature meets once a month for 14 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just
I didn't know it was that brief.
it is because nobody ever disagrees about anything.
Huh.
I mean, these guys obviously take their job seriously. They have 2 long meetings per month, plus
Oh.
all their committees.
That reminds me, though, we should mention that there's a vacancy right now.
Yes, there is. Yep. Which is why there's only 13 that I graded here when there's 14 legislators, because Brian Robeson went and became undersheriff, leaving a vacancy for the Groton seat.
So he got it incomplete.
Yeah, I didn't even grade him because it wasn't fair to grade him against other people.
Incomplete would have been funny, but
I should have. You're right.
when is the election?
February 10th.
Is that a Tuesday?
I don't
know. Usually things are on Tuesday.
I'm not the Groton reporter.
But District 9 is a little bit bigger than Groton.
Right. It's a part of Lansing and a part of
of
something
Dryden.
else. Dryden. Okay.
Yeah.
It is a Tuesday.
Just so if if you think that you are represented by the District 9 county legislator, you might want to look into voting. The final story is about New Roots. Our office is across the street from New Roots.
Yes.
And so we see the students carrying on student life.
I don't
all
know
the
if I would
time.
call it. It certainly wasn't my kind of student life. There are
Now,
some
how is it different?
They're just definitely
Seems like there's a lot of them that are smokers, for one.
yes, smokers.
You didn't have smokers?
More than when I was in high school.
Oh.
I feel like there's.
That's why I'm asking you.
Just
because
a-
you're-
Well, I don't know.
you're
At least
young people.
in my high school, you at least hid.
Just a.
You didn't like stand like 20 feet away from the school.
It's a quirky bunch. There's always this.
But I love how they dress.
Yeah, and there's always one couple that likes to make out breaks in front of the chandelier.
Chanticleer.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's abnormal student
No, I
behavior.
guess not.
It's just unusual because it's in the middle of downtown instead of on the playground.
That's what I like. Is that this because it's ironic because the DeWitt Mall is the old high school.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and so the school used to be right downtown.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so now we have a school downtown again, and for that I kind of appreciate it. It's just nice to have.
I feel like these are all the kids I would have been friends with. Like they all look like they wouldn't fit in with the popular crowd, and I'm like, I get you guys.
Well,
So
now
what was the story?
Well, the story was we ran an opinion piece by Henry Kramer, who lives out in Dryden now, I think, but was a member of the Ithaca school board, the Ithaca City School Board. And he was taking New Roots to task, and this is early December, for their graduation rates, which are 59%, I think. And they also have, he says they've drifted from their mission, that this sort of island of misfit toys appearance that they have is just
awesome.
It's awesome, exactly.
It is.
We think so. He doesn't think so. So I talked to Tina Nilsson Hodges, who's both the principal and the superintendent, and which is also indicative of how everybody doubles up on everything at this school. And she explained that if a student wants to go to New Roots because they've heard that it's not a real school and it's a place where you don't really have to do any work, they can show up, they can stay for a day, find out that in fact you have to do more work at New Roots, and they leave. And it'd take them a day, take them a couple of weeks. But then that person, if they don't graduate from New Roots, that's counted against the graduation rate. It's a state rule. If you're there for 1 minute, you're part of the cohort.
Oh, wow.
And so that has happened a number of times where people get there and they're like, this is hard, and they're out of there.
I didn't know that.
Did she give any kind of, I guess, estimation on what she would like to think their actual?
No, I mean their graduation rate is also challenged by this misfit toy thing. Is that when you have the sort of outsiders who want to get the heck out of the mainstream public school and come to a experimental school, they have challenges. Some of them are actually classified as special needs kids. And some of them are just a little different. They're just not academically oriented in a conventional sense. And so shepherding them through high school is going to take some work. She thinks that they can get there, but they're only, what, 5 years old now? 5 or 6 years old. And they were reviewed by the state, and their charter was reviewed for 3 instead of 5 years because of the graduation rate problem.
Gotcha.
And so when Henry Kramer wrote this letter, they got a landslide of letters from parents of New Roots students saying, we love this school and Henry Kramer can take a long walk off a short pier. And we printed 3 of them in this week's Times. So that was pretty much that. There's more to it, but that is all the time we have. Thank you for joining us. This has been Around the Lake, a broadcast of the Ithaca Times and the Finger Lakes Community Newspapers. Keri Blakinger, Mike Nocella. I'm Bill Chaisson.
Thanks to
Joe Scaglione
of 4D Photographic for our wonderful opening montage. Thanks and goodbye.